Hello, Inky Jazz fans, and welcome to the second of our special MJF podcasts, this time featuring my interview with the fantastic bass player and composer Misha Mullov-Abbado. We discuss a whole variety of things, from his very diverse discography, to the world's most profound gig heckle, to his upcoming digital lockdown recording releases, and many more things besides. So sit back and enjoy my interview with Misha Mullov-Abbado. Right, well, Misha Mullov-Abbado, welcome to the Enki Jazz podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here. How has life been treating you in these strange times we are living in?
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, it's been most strange indeed. Most days I say I just about get used to it, but then every 3 or 4 days it all just seems just as bizarre as it was at the beginning. I feel like I'm just as busy as I was before, but everything is happening online or in my room or on my computer, just like it must be the whole music scene in the world.
Yeah,
but it's definitely unusual.
but are you relishing some new challenges, or are you a bit fed up of it, or is it all just water off a duck's back?
Yeah, it's kind of neither of them really. I'm just sort of accepting it. It's kind of interesting that it's just different, and I'm making the most of the fact that, okay, well, right now more recording projects are happening. Obviously, no live gigging, apart from online, of course. And yeah, it's I'm enjoying myself. I guess the two things the one thing I'm most nervous about is what it's going to all look like on the other side, whether things will be able to just go back to normal in the sense of the music industry being normal, whether that was even a good thing if we start talking about the amount of traveling going on, and just really anxious to know how the music scene is going to recover and pick up again, and whether it even will. So there's that fear, and then there was also that real sadness that I definitely have got over now of just all the things being cancelled. Like my and for me personally, especially my album launch tour, which was literally going to begin with a gig with you guys later. So
Yeah,
I'm getting over that now, but that was pretty hard. But also a good lesson in life. Like,
no.
I'm now looking back on all those conversations I was having in the last 6 months, organising for things this summer, and it's just almost kind of comical, thinking, "Oh, just don't stress about it, Mish. It's all going to be cancelled anyway."
Well, I'm very sorry to sort of open sore wounds, but it sounds like you're facing it all with a great deal of stoicism. So that's
Sure, yeah, as much as possible.
yeah, and as you say, so this is one of our MJF podcasts. This would have been Manchester Jazz Festival weekend that you would have been up playing with us, and you haven't been up to play with us for donkeys. We were just having a quick reminisce before we started recording, but you came and did a gig with us. Would that be about 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago in July. Wait,
No.
yeah, July. Got a poster somewhere.
Oh, great. And that was at the Wonder Inn, our first venue, and that was a very unusual and fantastic place. Um, but I'm glad to hear that you had fond memories from that gig as well.
Very, very fond. Yeah, we were just saying it was quite a short album tour. This is my second album, Cross Platform Interchange, that came out 3 years ago, and I just organised a 7-day UK, well, England tour in July of 2017, and I can definitely say that by a long way, the gig at the Wonder Inn was the most enjoyable by far, and that was probably due to many things, but I guess the audience
Yeah.
may help to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we've always had a great audience atmosphere, and particularly at the Wonder Inn, we had a very eclectic audience, which is fantastic and quite a changing audience. And I remember the people at that gig spanned from like suited business contingent who I think had just sort of stumbled on it after some late night drinking in the Northern Quarter, to some diehard jazz fans, to our resident involved audience member Pascal, who
Yes.
came out with I think one of the most intense audience interjections that we've, or profound maybe audience interjections we've ever come across, which you were saying was just in the middle of a bass intro.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so honoured to have now finally found out that that was the most intense audience interjection of his over his career as an attendee of the Wandering Jazz gigs. But yeah, I was doing. He'd already been shouting out and causing loads of merriness throughout the whole gig. But the final tune of mine starts with a free bass intro, like a solo bass, just kind of do something crazy before the band comes in, and in a perfectly timed into a little break, he just suddenly shouts, "So many questions, but where are the answers?" And the whole of the band and the front row of the audience just sort of turn, look at him, and look at me like, "Ooh, wow." I'm thinking, carry on playing like, "Wow, that's a good point. Where are the
answers?" That's probably the question that could pose the most self-doubt into a
and it was one thing that just made the rest of the band and I crack up with laughter for many hours after that gig was finished.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very glad.
I remember standing outside the venue with, I think, Matt from my band and Pascal, and he was telling us some story, but every minute or so we just suddenly have to interrupt himself by just bursting out laughing, running halfway down the street, and then running back and carrying on his story. So yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, no, he's certainly a big character on the Manchester jazz scene, and we're all the better for Pascal. So big thanks to Pascal if you're watching. So to get back on track with things, I wanted to ask a little bit about how you ended up getting into jazz, because obviously you come from quite a musical background, a lot of music growing up around the home, but I imagine, you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but that's mostly steeped in the sort of classical music background and the many forms that takes. And then you went and studied at Cambridge for your undergrad, is that right?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And so I imagine that also maybe had a bit more of a bearing towards maybe classical contemporary music, but then from there, obviously. Yeah. So how did all of that come about, and what were your first musical experiences, and how did it all end up being, well, more jazz focused over time?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. As you know, I guess I've been surrounded by music for pretty much my entire life, and it's almost all been in a kind of classical form. And I've always been really grateful for that, for the different, all the people I've got to meet, for that, all the music I've been exposed to, all the rehearsals, concerts I've got to be literally in the same room as, purely because of my family making music. And that's predominantly classical music, but both my parents actually have been quite involved in a lot of non-classical music, and kind of going down the more kind of experimental, multi-genre, specific, and more, especially with my stepdad Matthew, improvised music. So I've been exposed to that for quite a lot of my life. I've always been into classical music as an instrumentalist. I played the piano and French horn, and I was writing quite a lot of music as a teenager. But then I slowly started to get into jazz because I got a bass guitar for Christmas. Well, and that wasn't out of the blue. I had tried one and thought, oh, this is fun. I only have to play one note and it sounds great. And I think something about the bass and a bass instrument just really tickled me. I thought, whoa, this is good. And then at school, I started playing jazz because I could play the bass, and it's so suddenly jazz became this kind of second genre of music that became a sort of thread of mine in my teenage years, I suppose. But this was all self-taught, so it was really just a hobby, basically. And then I got to Cambridge, where, as you say, most of the music going on there is predominantly classical. But just by chance, the year that I got there, no one there really played the bass, and so I got involved and roped into all the jazz groups. And then I started to actually get really, really into jazz and really serious about jazz and started to, for the first time, contemplate, wow, maybe I want to be doing this. Maybe this really suits me. Somehow it just seemed to suit all the things that I'm good at, and not really delve too much in the things I'm not good at, as a musician, that is. And so I started to get more serious, and met quite a few musicians who I play with regularly now, like Liam Dunachie, the pianist in my band, Alex Hitchcock, amazing tenor sax player, Tom Miller's another pianist I play with quite a lot, Tom Green, trombone player who was basically running the Cambridge jazz scene when I got there. So I'm extremely grateful to him for a lot of the opportunities. And yeah, I slowly just figured out that I'd rather be playing jazz bass than French horn in an orchestra, even though I did enjoy that a lot as well. And so then it became, okay, well, I think I'm going to go to music college then, and probably should start the double bass. And I did that not out of a burning desire to play the double bass, but more out of the thought that realistically I probably ought to play double bass. But then I got to Academy to do the postgrad jazz course, and really quickly just kind of started playing only double bass, and it's now basically the only instrument I play. I play a bit of bass guitar, and that's just somehow taken over, and I'm so glad that I took that path, because it means that I'm always playing, writing, improvising, not improvising, kind of doing all the different things that I like doing under one kind of career. And I think it's a lot easier to do that as a jazz musician, to have lots of different what's the phrase, strings to your bow or something. It's as a classical musician, it's quite hard to make a career out of being an instrumentalist and a composer, for example.
Did you only start, were you a self-taught double bass player for only a couple of years before going to Academy for your masters?
I was a self-taught bass guitarist, and then I started the double bass with the intention of going to music college, and I had a few lessons, so kind of yeah. But however, at this point, I wasn't expecting to become like solely a double bass player. I basically auditioned for music college, and I sent everyone I was auditioning for, every place, Nick Smart, Martin Hathaway, I think it was, for example, a message saying, here's the deal, I've just started double bass, I'm mainly a bass guitarist, I love to play both at the audition, but just so you know, I haven't been playing the double bass for very long. And so when I got my place at the Academy, it was kind of off. He made it very clear to me that it was because he could see that I had potential, given that he knew how long I'd been playing the double bass for, as in, like, we'll give you a place, but sort your technique out. The first year of Academy, or the 8 or 9 months between my audition and starting, and then the whole of the first year, I had a lot of catching up to do. I spent a lot of time working on really basic double bass technique.
I was thinking that might have been a way to grease the wheels for me getting in if I'd said the same in my audition. I've only actually been playing the saxophone for like a couple of months, so, just I mean that's pretty incredible.
Don't try that at home.
That is quite an incredible quick turnaround of a change of instrument and career. So amazing. But yeah, so I mean, but on from there, you've got quite an eclectic career now, as you're saying. You're by no means limited in the world of jazz music, as much as that's a wide bracket. But I was having a delve into your discography earlier, which is very extensive already, to be honest. Just to drop a few things that you've done for people to check out at home. Obviously, you've done quite a few out and out maybe jazz albums, such as like Ralph Wild's Mosaic Project and Tom Miller's Quartet, Tom Green's Septet. You've got all the Zyrobop stuff. You've recorded with Alice Savadsky and Peter Jones and all of this. But then there's a whole other side of things where it feels maybe more in the sphere of world music, and maybe even a bit of sort of singer-songwriter sensibility with some of the artists you work with, but doing a lot of arranging for them as well, and bringing in quite a heavy dose of maybe a more jazz sensibility on top as well. How did you end up working in that scene as well?
Yeah, but my musical involvement has spread quite a lot to and out to loads of different kind of scenes, as it were. I don't think there's anything that really kind of connects all those different musicians. So, for example, like I play quite a lot with Sam Lee, who's a folk singer. So that's not really in the jazz scene, but that there are connections there. We have played with a lot of the same musicians in the past. Yeah, I guess my skills as an arranger and even a little bit more recently as a producer have kind of spread a little bit.
Well, one of the albums in particular that I was enjoying checking out earlier was now I'm going to have a stab at the name, but you can correct me when I mispronounce the name. Rainer Schoenbrandt.
Ah, yeah, right. Yeah, that's really good, actually. That's perfectly pronounced.
Well, my partner is German, so
Oh, of course, yeah.
I'm by no means fluent, but muddling.
Sure. Yeah, Rainer is a musician that an amazing sort of virtuoso classical guitarist and composer and singer. His first three albums are incredible, and I would highly recommend checking them out. They are sort of with a slight spiritual element, like sort of devotional songs that he's written, and quite unusual and kind of musically really complex, harmonically very rich and sort of dense and unusual, and to me therefore interesting. We've both been featured on a lot of the same people's albums, and he just randomly had a bit of a left turn at one point when he had a kid and just decided to write loads of really silly and eccentric but totally serious and genuine baby music.
Great.
So his album It's a Boonie,
yeah,
he asked me if I would help him arrange everything basically. And that's literally what I did, and it was a lot of fun. And basically his reasoning being that there's a lot of really terrible baby music out there that is out there for parents to get hold of just to put something on, or in conjunction with stories or apps or whatever. And he just thought, okay, I'm going to do something much better, in his opinion.
Brilliant.
And so I helped him with that, and I think it's doing well. It's not quite hitting the scene as quite his fans as much as his first three albums, but it's also quite a niche, weird little thing to do. So that's kind of to be expected.
And it has broadened
It's really good quality.
Broadened his audience base to the under fours, which is broadened
his audience. Yeah. But I think it's doing very well in the sense that I think a lot of people, everyone who hears it seems to really like it, and it's really good quality music. It's not like it's anyone over the age of 4 is not going to like it.
Yeah, well, I certainly enjoyed it a lot, checking it out.
Great.
So, yeah. But there's a few different artists like that you've done some instrumental arrangements of their music.
Yeah, so a lot of singer-songwriters like Nessie Gomez is one who has been touring. I mean, obviously not right now, but I've been touring with quite a bit over the last few years. Like you say, it's just spread to other musicians as well.
So I'd recommend for anyone to go onto your website and check out the discography if you want to check all of those things out, because it'd take a while, and I'll just mash more names that I don't know how to pronounce correctly. So I'll let people go and search those out for themselves. But I did want to ask a bit more. So how did you end up getting more involved as a producer and engineer for some of these things as well? Because that's a very different set of skills to being a performer or a composer.
Yeah, good question. That's come really recently, and I should say not really. I couldn't really say to a professional level yet, although things are changing really fast now. So maybe in a couple of weeks, I could say something else. I don't know. I've always been really keen on editing recordings and just trying to make live recordings just a little bit nicer or copying together versions of live recordings to make like a best moments kind of live recording, a recording of live gigs. And so I've always had that sort of passion. But I guess it all started in terms of actually recording stuff myself about 3 years ago. I used to, so my partner at the time was a singer who had never recorded before, and we, as a project, literally just for the fun of it, we just thought we'd record some of her songs. Mm-hmm. And she'd never recorded anything before. She's not a musician professionally, and I'd never recorded anyone before, so I basically just bought the most minimal setup, and it was just a fun project that turned into being well, by my standards, which are quite low in the recording way, quite good. And that's one of the albums that's on my website. Her name's Julia Gelbke, and it's a album of Spanish and Portuguese songs that she's written. And kind of in the last few months, I've begun recording for quite a few other people and basically running similar projects where I maybe don't have the most refined skills as a sound engineer in terms of having all the right gear and everything, but I'm quite good at the whole more kind of interactive producer type thing of being encouraging and getting people to do what they're good at doing.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And one last thing that I wanted to ask about before we delve more into your own music. I also came across, is it Tabia Debus?
Yeah.
I'm probably mispronouncing
her.
Yeah.
She's a fantastic recorder player who was on the City Music Foundation scheme that I was on as well. She was on it a little bit more recently. And she used for her main projects as part of the scheme, she commissioned 12 composers to write pieces in response to the 12 Telemann Fantasies. And so I was one of those, and I wrote a piece of music for solo recorder to go alongside, I think, the 10th Telemann solo fantasy for flute.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, is that the only thing that you've written so far that is maybe explicitly in the world of classical music, or is that something you've dipped in and out of?
Depends what you mean by explicit. I've had quite a few commissions for groups in the last few years. One quite big one last year for the BBC Concert Orchestra.
Fantastic.
Whether you can say it's exclusively classical or not, I mean, that's
sure.
Depending on your religious beliefs, I guess.
Great. Yeah. How did you approach writing for symphony orchestra?
I'd written for orchestra before, as in composed for orchestra, but never for a professional orchestra. But I'd had a few commissions for. I'd had one commission for a youth orchestra a few years ago, and before then, as a kind of young student, had written for orchestras that friends and I kind of put together. So I've had a bit of experience, and playing in an orchestra for years and years as a French horn player has definitely helped me know a lot about how an orchestra works, what works and what doesn't, what sounds good. And then separately to composing, I've arranged a lot of things for orchestra in the last few years. And so I've just had a lot of experience, probably a lot more experience with orchestras than like big bands or things in the jazz thing, which has come much more recently. So it wasn't a completely new thing. I mean, it was still terrifying, but the experience last year, that was. But it was quite an amazing feeling hearing something I'd written played by a professional orchestra, and especially that first rehearsal. I've kind of got used to that feeling as a composer for like a student thing or whatever. You come to the first rehearsal and you're like, oh no, they're not playing it right. Oh, why did I write it too hard? And I've just kind of got so used to that as a composer. Yeah. And I'll just never forget the feeling in Abbey Road. I think it was supposed to be Maida Vale, but it got moved. The concert orchestra starts this piece that I'd written, and I'm just like, oh wow, that sounds really good. It's like so much better than it did on my computer.
Amazing. Yeah, I bet that was incredible. Is there a recording of that online anywhere for people to check out?
Um,
Who knows?
Not at the moment. It was on um, it was on iPlayer, but I'm not sure if I don't think it's there anymore because it was broadcast on Radio 3. It was a Radio 3 commission for last year's London Jazz Festival, and then it got played, but I don't think it's there anymore. And currently, I'm not sure what's going to be done with the piece, but I'm really hoping it's going to get recorded at some point in the future.
Well, to be
It's
honest,
a cello concerto for my stepdad Matthew, actually. So it combines improvise a lot. It's got a lot of features him improvising quite a lot, as well as all the written stuff.
brilliant. I would write them an email and suggest that as they can't be making any new content at the moment, it's probably a great time to resurrect all those old recordings and give them a second life.
Yeah, no, as you asked, I kind of had to just pause and think. There is a recording, but am I allowed to tell people?
Yeah.
It does exist online somewhere.
That's fine. That's fine. Brilliant. So, yeah, thank you for all of that. Before we then jump into chatting about your last two albums and an upcoming album, let's take a listen. So, this first track that you've picked out for us is from Cross-Platform Interchange, which is the album you were touring when you came to The Wondering, and the track that you've picked out for us is called Waves. So this is the studio take with some footage from the studio as well. Is there anything you'd like to say about this track in particular for people listening?
Oh God, it's been a while since usually I'm in the flow of this because we do gigs and I have to think of what random thing I can say about the piece to the audience. The piece. But this piece I wrote about 4 years ago, just when I was starting a new version of my band, because I did a little lineup change, instrument change, and I guess it's about the waves, the way in which you can experience something really huge and profound, and you think your emotions just soar and then they fall away and that's it. But no, that's not quite the way it is. Your emotions and responses to things come in waves. Hopefully we are not currently in the middle of loads of waves of virus outbreaks. I don't know, but for that being another example that you have loads of different peaks of things, and so that's kind of what inspired the piece in a way. Just the loads of big crescendos, big diminuendos, big crescendos, big diminuendos. At the risk of sounding obvious, because all music has that, but that's a particular feature of this piece.
Fantastic. So this is Waves. Enjoy. Great. Well, so that was Waves. Thanks very much, Misha. Beautiful. So that was from cross-platform interchange, but you had your debut album was the one before that. That was New Ansonia. Am I
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
pronouncing that correctly? What is Ansonia? Is that a word I should be aware of, or is that a?
Um, no, it's a made-up word. It's well, half made up. I used to live on Anson Road, which is in Willesden Green. If anyone knows Gladstone Park, it's the road that runs along the bottom of that. And it was during my second year of academy, I lived in one of those jazz houses that was kind of falling apart almost the whole time on Anson Road. And I wrote this tune called New Ansonia, and it just happened to do quite well. I think that was just when I was starting to get recognised as a band leader and composer. And it ended up becoming a bit of an anthem. It's quite a catchy tune. And so I ended up making that the title track of my debut album.
Fantastic.
And so I think to work well as an album title.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely got an air of mystique about it, which is nice.
Yeah. So in a way, it probably works better as an album title than cross-platform interchange, which is and probably a bit confusing for a lot of non-English people, as in just because it's less catchy and memorable and kind of bite-sized album name sort of thing.
And so that was released straight away on Edition Records through winning the Kenny Wheeler Prize at the end of Academy. But I presume the band itself, if you're saying that tune in particular was written in your but it was Masters course, wasn't it? So it was written in your second year of Masters then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long had that band been running before? Was it something you put together for the end of your Masters, or?
Oh, I see. No, I mean, I put it together for my recital at the end of my first year.
Okay.
And that was the original band. That's a bit different from the band that I have now. So it was a quintet, and of course, all the music I wrote or that's on my first album was for that. I ended up writing for that band, and I guess about half of it I wrote while I was at Academy, and half of it I wrote in the months after.
Okay,
I think.
Great.
I'm trying to remember now desperately. Yeah, I mean, I guess I recorded it like about a year into after graduating. So yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so that was with Scott Chapman and Matthew Hurd, who have carried on playing with you for years, but also with Tom Green and Jacob Collier. And
exactly, yeah.
And then you changed the lineup around and added some extra musicians in and all that. And what was the reason for wanting to branch out to a bigger front line and all of that?
It was a few reasons. I think I knew that I wanted to. So the reason why I decided to have a front line of alto sax and trombone for my first band was kind of not really anything to do with wanting to have those instruments. It was just the two musicians, Matthew Hurd and Tom Green. I just really wanted to play with them specifically. And so that's why that kind of came about. And then by the time I'd released my first album and finished touring that, it just felt about right that I'd changed things up a bit. And I really wanted to carry on playing with Matthew Hurd, and James Davison and Sam Rapley are two other musicians that I really, really wanted to play with more. And I just thought it would be really nice to have that trumpet, alto and tenor horn section. The sort of emphasis on the kind of melody, given that it's sort of two high, one low kind of thing, and the fact that it lends itself to lots of really nice arrangements, but allowing there to be enough freedom that it starts to get quite hard to have that amount of freedom if you start to have four or more horns.
Sure.
And also it's not so good for your band balance. But as a band leader, that is. But I just felt like I wanted to just crank things up a little bit, basically.
Yeah, great. So that second album then, cross-platform interchange. That, as we said, is the one that you came to the Wonder in with, and that was I think for audience and for us, that was definitely one of the highlights of our gigs at the Wonder, and that was a really
Great.
blinding gig. But unfortunately, at that time, Sam had injured both of his elbows, hadn't he? Well, while he was out of action, we had Alex Hitchcock on that gig, which
Yeah, correct. Yeah, who had, I think, hadn't ever played with the band before that week, but then did the whole tour and has done a few gigs since then. Whenever Sam's not been able to make them.
Alex has been super dep a couple of times on gigs for NQ Jazz. He did the
Oh,
same
really?
thing with Andrew McCormack's Graviton
Oh,
project,
wow.
which is a
Yeah,
tricky one to dep on as well. And
yeah,
Josh Arcoleo obviously is the usual tenor player
yeah,
for that.
sure, yeah.
And yeah, Alex had a very short turnaround on getting all of that together as well. So he's like our super tenor
Definitely
dep.
proved himself to be great.
Yeah,
He's actually releasing an album on Edition. Is it even out yet? Like around now,
yeah, yeah.
I think. Um,
Orb.
or yeah, exactly. I think Dave Stapleton was trying to make a point of having around like four younger band leaders albums come out around now. So we had Rob Luft,
Yeah.
the Orb album, mine, and I think Laura Jurd's new album is coming out around now as well.
Great. Yeah, killing bunch of albums. That's a great
Yeah, well, at
drop.
least like, intimidate me not by the kind of age and ridiculous status of some of the other Edition artists
Yeah.
to be released like, just before mine or just after mine.
So moving on then to the new album. So this is called Dream Circus. Is that
Yeah,
that's the name of the album? Right, and
hopefully it will be more catchy than cross-platform interchange.
well, and as I was just saying to you, just as we started the chat before we were recording, I had a listen back to cross-platform interchange for the first time in a while, and I'd listened to it quite a lot around the time when you were touring it, and I'd forgotten just how like infectious some of those melodies were. I'm trying to remember what's the one that sounds a bit Western? Do 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 do.
Okay, the second track, No Strictly Dancing, is
Yeah, yeah,
yes, so many people say that just gets stuck around their heads, and I think
yeah.
I've had like 4 or 5 instances of someone come and tells me that it's really like another tune, and then they play me the tune, and it really is. It's like, wow, it really is like that, and I'd honestly never heard it before. But 4 or 5 separate tunes,
Great. Well,
separate
that's fine.
examples, like, and it's like, wow, that's weird.
As long as no one's making a copyright claim yet, you're fine.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
But yeah. But I genuinely did thoroughly enjoy that album, so everyone should go and check that one out. But also be ready for the 12th of June, which is the release date for Dream Circus. So what were the ideas going into the new album? Because obviously we've kept the same lineup now from cross-platform,
Yeah.
so you didn't have instrumentation or personnel as the change to make something new. So this is
So, yeah.
so what were your thoughts going into it? What did you want to achieve with this?
So the main difference is that for part of my first album and for most of my second album, I went down the whole production, multi-track, layering up, click track kind of direction. And so Waves, which you just heard now, is a good example of that. There's lots of things going on, and I even kind of specifically came up with a system where we could all record as though we're playing together, but then not actually. So we'd all be playing, do a take, but Liam would be playing keys, I'd be playing bass guitar instead, so they were all silent in the room, and the drums would be in a separate room anyway. And then the idea being to replace the keys with real piano afterwards, and then replace the bass with real bass afterwards. Basically, giving the option to just do whatever you wanted, to cut things out, change things, layer things up. Not a very jazzed approach, and I really wanted to do this for that second album. And I've had some criticism for going down that approach, but I'm really glad that I managed to get the experience. And you definitely lose something, but you gain something because you get to create new textures that you wouldn't have been able to do on a live gig. Anyway, I wanted to completely let go of that for this third album and focus just on the band, being a band and us all playing together. So we recorded Cross-Platform Interchange shortly after we had the lineup change, but since then we've had so many like truly incredible opportunities gig-wise. We've been to Mexico City like about 3 years ago. We went on a little tour. I guess it's technically a tour. It was 2 gigs, and we've done so much performing as a band, and it's just one of the favorite things in my whole life, this band, really. And the way that a lot of the music I've written in the last few years has matured because of the fact that we've played it, gigged it, adapted it. I really wanted to record it and to really document how we are as a band live on gigs. And so I thought, okay, well, this time, instead of spending all that money and putting all my energy into all the multi-tracking and getting different days in different studios, I'm going to make sure that we find a really good studio and make this the most fun recording session we've ever had. And just to give it some life and energy. And for that reason, I decided to go to Copenhagen. And there was a few different reasons for that. Dave from Audition recommended the Village studio there as being really good, user-friendly, good piano, big, good value for money, although you lose that value once you consider all the travel costs and everything. But just the fact that going away somewhere else just means that you have a really good experience. When I was considering studio options, and particularly like the quality of the piano, I was advised, I think I was basically choosing between that studio and Livingston studio in Wood Green, which is an amazing studio, fantastic piano, really great gear. But, recording in North London, we all know that someone's going to get a gig that evening, so they'll just take the gig and then they'll leave. It'll be fine, but somehow I just thought it would be so much more fun and special, unique to actually go away somewhere. So that's why we did that. And it was a really, really fun few days. And I think that really contributed to making the album sound really fresh. So that, in a way, that's the kind of circus part of Dream Circus, is the traveling band nature.
Great.
Of this album, that it makes it really different to the last ones.
And did that also then just open the possibility of having Jasper Højby as a producer working on it while you were in Copenhagen anyway, or was that a malice aforethought?
That thought came after, because I basically decided to go there and use the studio, and I already knew at this point that Dave himself had used the studio for a lot of his recordings. Jasper had used it for pretty much every one of his recordings.
Right.
And then I was thinking about the question of, okay, well, should I get a producer or not? Because there are loads of pros and cons as to why any jazz band leader should or shouldn't get a producer. And I eventually decided, yeah, I think I do want to get a producer. It is worth it, especially as a band leader, but as the double bass player in the band as well. It's good to take that pressure off the listening so that I can focus on more on my playing. And also just have another pair of ears, someone that I could look up to and trust, whose judgment I could trust, even if in a moment it would be hard to hear opinions that conflicted with mine. And so once I then thought I'm going to get a producer, well, my obvious first choice would be Jasper Højby, given that he was my bass teacher, is also on the record label and knows the studio very well, lives in Copenhagen. And he was very much up for it. And he really, really transformed the vibe of the band. The thing about the album that I'm most happy with that we achieved on the album and not on any of the gigs leading up to that was, I think, all down to him really pushing us and getting us to loosen up a bit and play in a completely different way.
Fantastic. Oh, well, can't wait to hear it. So once again, that's 12th of June for everyone to wait with bated breath a couple more weeks until that's up. But there'll be a link to that down below. There's a couple of singles out already, aren't there? So people can wet their whistles and go and
exactly.
look that out. And in the meantime, let's play the other track that you've picked out for us. So this is Gromit's Grand Outing. This is also from cross-platform interchange, but quite a different track to the first one that you've picked out for us. Is there anything you'd like to add about this for the listeners at home?
Well, it's quite a feature of, I think, all my albums, and sometimes a criticism that there's a lot of variety of different musical styles. I just can't help that. I like a lot of different types of music, and can't really limit myself to writing in one particular way. As much as I can try, though. But this piece was just one of those really impulsive, like it came from a period where I was encouraged to try and write a tune a day, or just write something a day, even if it's just a bit of melody. And I sometimes go through these phases, and I guess it helps somehow. I don't really know, but to get the kind of creative thing flowing every evening, if you sort of write a melody, they're probably all rubbish, but then it will probably mean that in a week's time, when I have to actually sit down and write something else for someone else for that commission, I'll just be in a better frame of mind and used to churning out, like that I don't take it seriously. But this happened to be one of those. I was just in bed one night, about to go to bed and about to do my daily kind of write a tune thing. And I think I'd had a function gig with Liam Dunachie from my band, the pianist from my band. And he just made some comment like, "Hey, Misha, I was just watching The Wrong Trousers last night. And you know that tune, when Gromit goes on a walk with the wrong trousers?" And he just pointed out some really weird chord that is in it that is actually quite unusual and quite tasteful. And so this isn't the main theme of Wallace and Gromit. This is the Gromit going for a walk theme that you only hear once. And I basically just wrote a bebop head that was based on that. The head, as you're about to hear, is really short. It literally took me 10 seconds to write because there's nothing in it, and then it just repeats up a semitone, and then in a classic jazz fashion, you then just have a solo on it, and that's it.
Fantastic. Well, sit back and enjoy Gromit's Grand Outing. Okay, so that was Gromit's Grand Outing. Great fun. So the last musical thing that I wanted to delve into with you is the Patchwork Orchestra, which has been running.
Patchwork Jazz Orchestra, yeah.
Patchwork Jazz Orchestra, sorry, and that's been running for quite a while now, or it feels like it has in a positive way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did that all come about? And maybe just tell us a bit about the ethos behind that. And you had an album out last year. Uh, so,
Yeah, the band started 6 years ago, I think.
hmm,
It was around the time I was finishing at the academy. It's a one of those bands that has somehow still managed to survive being a leaderless, collaborative big band.
hmm,
Um, it's hard work. It's so hard work to have a band where there's no leader.
yeah,
We've kind of managed to have different phases of making it work, with different people being more at the forefront of making the
yeah,
band work. But it all started off. I think it's fair to say that Tom Green started the band. He definitely got the gig, our first gig, and it all came off the back of a trip we all did to Italy that he organised, to Ischia, this island off Naples.
cool.
Have concerts every week in the summer. I was actually supposed to be going there with my band next month, with Tom Green's band as well, but that obviously isn't happening now. And anyway, so it basically started off as a kind of music college, London Music College's kind of jazz group.
Mhm.
Because and loads of us had been playing in different big bands at our respective colleges. There's a lot of Nigel musicians, and to try and just get together and play all the music that we'd written between us.
Mhm.
And so that's essentially what it is. It's just an originals big band, and we've managed to survive this long.
Yeah.
And there's been a few of us that have been more in charge than other people, and we've kind of got into a good system now, where there's like a core band and then a secondary first dibs band, and then that also expands to a lot of other people. But we got some funding to go towards recording an album a couple of years ago, and that was released a year ago, and that and yeah, and that's been doing really well. And so, as you can imagine, that it's every tune's written by someone else on that album. We recorded it at Air Studios, and we are actually now kind of last minute. I think this was my idea even. We are releasing a little. When does this get broadcast? This podcast?
The end of May.
Okay, we have released an EP, unless anything weird happens in the next 3 days. You never really know these days, do you? 3 days from today, we are releasing an EP that we have recorded from our homes. So for a change, just to try and be super original, we're picking a kind of lockdown isolation video album, and it was actually genuinely quite original when we first floated the idea. And by now it's kind of getting a bit boring and repetitive, so we're having to make sure the videos are going to be as interesting as possible to not blend in with the whole sea of split screen. Oh, look what I've been doing, kind of musicians internet scene right now.
Yeah.
We're releasing a little EP. Funnily enough, my tune "New Ansonia" is on that. It's the EP. It's even though I wrote it 7 years ago, the EP is made up of a couple of newer tunes that have been added to the pad more recently than we recorded our last album, but that we played still since the lockdown. And then 3 older tunes that just never made it onto our first album, like my one, because of the fact that around that time I'd already recorded it for my album, and also 2 really good arrangements, covers that we'd had in our pad the whole time, because our main album we wanted to focus on original music.
Yeah.
And one of these is Endless Stars, the Fred Hurst tune that Tom Green's arranged for the band. The other one is the standard If I Were a Bell that Kieran McLeod arranged for the band. So we're literally right now in the process. I think since this podcast started, I've been seeing my Patchwork WhatsApp about 50 times, which is normal for well, any hour of the day, really.
Yeah.
We're all kind of sending bounces of the tracks back and forth and getting comments from everyone, because it's obviously quite a thing at the moment to be doing mixing and recording and mixing remotely, not just because everyone's got different setups, but having someone mix your track, if you're there in the room, is so much more productive. You can do it so much more productively. You can be there and say a bit more of that, more. Okay, that's too much, a bit less. Whereas if you send someone a list of comments, they make the changes, and then you get it back and you're maybe change that, and then of course you then send it off to everyone in the band, and then they have to give their feedback, and obviously not everyone agrees, and there's strong personalities, including mine.
Chaos reigns. Excellent.
Exactly.
But brilliant. So you already have one lockdown video out with.
Yeah, so that's one of the tracks from this EP that's called "The Light That Shines," which is also going to be the title of the EP.
Great.
By the sax player Tom Smith, and so that track is finished. We're just in the process of finishing the others, literally at the 11th hour, because the album's coming out in 3 days, and I can definitely say that some of them are not finished yet.
Well, that's great.
And we'll be releasing videos of all those tracks in the coming weeks.
Okay, well, we look forward to being able to hear that. And of course, by the time this goes out, everyone can just go and delve straight in and be unaware of.
Although you know, some videos take ages to make. I've just begun working on mine, and it might be some time before that's done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really hope.
But the EP will be available. But
the EP will be available. Yeah, that will definitely be the case.
The videos can sustain us through the rest of summer.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, listen, Misha, it's been such a pleasure having you chat to us today. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And obviously a massive shame that we're missing you for the Manchester Jazz Festival this year, but hopefully we will be able to get you back soon and hear the music of the new album live in the flesh as soon as possible. But yeah, in the meantime, could you please leave our audience with your top tips for surviving lockdown? What have you been doing to keep your mind engaged, your spirit nourished?
Spirit nourished. I don't think I've been succeeding at any of those things. Although it's a good point, but I think I've definitely fallen in the trap of feeling a lot of pressure to be hard on myself, make the most of this golden opportunity to read loads, get into a good routine, and I think I've just accepted by now that I'm not good at routines or getting up in the morning or cooking or reading or any of that. But I've definitely enjoyed making the most of outdoor time. I think since Boris Johnson's extremely not confusing message 2 days ago, we are now maybe allowed to go outside for as long as we want. Is that right?
As long as you stay indoors.
As long as we stay indoors, yeah. As long as only the top half is outside.
Yeah.
But before a couple of days ago, I think it was any sort of outdoor trips felt like leaving prison in a good way, as in quite amazing. So definitely just making sure I got outside at least once a day, and going for runs as well. I go for runs every now and then, normally for my kind of mental health, almost just to kind of keep sane. Usually I decide to go for a run in the evening if I'm in a bad mood and I want to just let off some steam. But every few days I've been going for a run, and that's really sorted me out, I think. And the other thing that I would definitely recommend is, if it's not groundbreaking, if anyone has not seen Game of Thrones, when are you going to ever have the time to watch 73 hours of a TV series again? So that was fun. I think I finished.
Great.
It's good. And I think I got through the whole thing in a month, which is
impressive.
Insane. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it took so long that I started watching it in the UK. Then I lived in South Africa for a bit and carried on watching it in South Africa, and then obviously finished up last year, whenever it was. But they feel like a lifetime ago when I started.
Well, I remember watching it, just thinking, I can't believe this took people 9 years to watch, and I just watched the whole thing in a month. I had the biggest calm down after ever. Just like, oh my god,
that's intense. I have the same thing with people constantly telling me I need to watch Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is the
Yeah,
best TV ever done.
yeah, I've been told that as well.
But again, it's got to be a similar amount of time investment.
Yeah,
And I'm too scared to take the plunge because I know I can't come out the other end till it's done. So
yeah, I know. My girlfriend recommended that I started watching Game of Thrones. I finally did, and she'd already seen it, obviously, so she was watching it with me because she was quite into watching it again.
Mhm.
She was just getting so frustrated with just how obsessed I was with every single day. Like, all right, Game of Thrones, like, oh, don't you want a day off? Like, no, I don't want a day off. I want to know what happens at the end. And so for that reason, she keeps suggesting other series that we should watch, and I'm like, are you sure? You know what I'm like? It's going to get to episode 3, and I'm never going to want to do anything else until we finished it.
Yeah, I'm totally sympathise. So that's why I'm avoiding Breaking Bad at all costs.
But on that note, definitely, everyone should treat themselves to indulging in binging at least one series, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, Misha, thanks so much for your time. It's been a massive pleasure. And as I said, we really look forward to having you back up at the Whiskey Jar as soon as we can. Keep well and take care, and we'll look forward to the new album.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing you in the flesh soon.
Indeed. Take care, Misha. All the best.
Yeah.
Hello again, NQ Jazz fans. Thanks so much for taking the time to tune into the podcast today. A big thanks to Misha, of course, for giving his time to talk to us. Please check out his new release, Dream Circus, coming out on the 12th of June on Edition Records. It's sounding fantastic. And also keep your eyes peeled today for the release of the Patchwork Jazz Orchestra's digital release. Please head over to patreon.com/NQJazz to check out all of our digital program, concerts, silent movies and soundtracks, the rest of our podcasts, a whole host of things over there. And obviously, if people would like to pledge to support, it all goes towards keeping our content ticking over and keeping artists employed. Thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow for our interview with Ian Bellamy. Take care. Bye-bye.